My mother Nancy has a voice that carries. Not loudly. She would hate to be described as loud. Would correct you with the specific dignity of a woman who considers herself refined, and who has confused refinement with the right to say cruel things quietly. Her voice carries the way cold carries, the way a draft carries, finding every exposed surface in a room and making its presence felt without ever raising itself above the conversational. She had been using this voice on me for 27 years, and I had learned to feel it in my body before I fully processed it in my mind, a specific tightening in my chest, a stillness in my hands, the particular bracing of a person who has been hit in the same place enough times to know what's coming before the impact arrives. I felt it the moment she looked across the Christmas table and opened her mouth. We were 14 people around a table that seated 12 comfortably and 14 with the deliberate optimism of a family that valued togetherness over elbow room. The turkey had been carved. The wine had been poured. My Aunt Carla, who sat beside me every Christmas because we had established years ago that sitting beside each other was a survival strategy for us both, had just passed me the rolls and was in the middle of a sentence about her neighbor's new dog when Nancy's voice cut across the table with the precision of something thrown. She was talking to my Uncle Ray about Melissa. Melissa, my younger sister. Melissa, the corporate attorney. Melissa, who had just made partner at 31, who had the apartment in the city and the wardrobe that cost more than some people's annual salaries, and who arrived at family Christmases with the specific ease of a person who has been told her whole life that she is exactly right, which after enough repetitions becomes simply the atmosphere a person walks in. I loved Melissa in the complicated, layered way you love a sibling who has been elevated at your expense. I love the person and grieve the comparison, which are two different things that live uncomfortably in the same chest. Nancy was telling Ray about the partnership, the details of it, the firm's name, the specialty, the salary range she had clearly researched or been told, and was now distributing to the table with the satisfaction of a woman presenting evidence that she had done something correctly. She talked about Melissa the way she always talked about Melissa, with the specific warmth she reserved for things that confirmed her own good judgment, as if Melissa's success was primarily proof of Nancy's success, as if the partnership had been achieved by Melissa's excellent choices and Nancy's excellent raising, and those two things were essentially the same thing. And then Ray said, the way uncles say things at Christmas tables after the second pour of wine, "What about Lauren, Nancy? What's Lauren up to these days?" I felt the tightening before she spoke. She smiled, the smile that preceded the voice. She said, "Lauren is still doing her fitness thing." Her fitness thing. I want to stop for a moment and let you sit with those 3 words the way I have sat with 3 words in various forms for my entire adult life. My fitness thing. Not my business. Not my career. Not the thing I had built over 6 years from a single client in a church hall with rented equipment into an operation that had its own training facility and a team of 4 coaches and a client wait list that ran 3 months long and a social following that had crept past 400,000 people over the previous year and that had attracted the attention of one of the largest activewear and supplement brands in the country. My fitness thing. Said in the tone of a woman describing a hobby she found mildly embarrassing and was choosing to be patient about. She continued, "She's always loved it. You know how Lauren was. Always in the gym, always the physical one. It suits her. It's just not." And here she paused, the pause that was the most precise instrument in Nancy's collection, the pause that made the room fill in the blank with whatever their imagination provided while giving Nancy the ability to say later that she had never actually said the thing the pause implied. It's not Melissa's path. Everyone finds what works for them. The table absorbed this. Some people nodded. Some people found their plates interesting. Carla beside me put her fork down with the careful deliberateness of a woman exercising enormous restraint. I looked at my water glass. I want to tell you about my fitness thing. I want to tell you about it the way it deserves to be told, which is not the way Nancy told it, which is not the way it sounded in that pause across a Christmas table with 14 people and too many chairs. I started training at 15 because I was depressed, and my body was the only thing I felt I had any agency over. Not in the disordered way. Not the way that required intervention. Though I understand now as an adult that I was closer to that edge than I knew at the time. I started because moving made the darkness in my chest less solid, because the weight room at the local gym was one of the few places I had ever been where nobody's voice carried, where the only thing being assessed was what I could do and what I was working toward and whether I showed up again tomorrow. I showed up. I showed up for 12 years, which is a long time to show up for anything. By the time I was 20, I was coaching other people informally, friends of friends, people who saw what I was doing and asked how I was doing it. By 22, I had a certification and 3 paying clients. By 23, I had 12 clients and had started a social account that documented my training philosophy, not the aesthetic version of fitness content, not the before and after transformation content that turned human bodies into problems to be solved, but something different, something that talked about what it felt like to be strong, what it meant to build capacity over time, what happened to a person's relationship with themselves when they learned to trust their body instead of fighting it. People found it. People found it and shared it and wrote to me about what it had changed for them. And I wrote back because I meant it, because every one of those messages was a version of the 15-year-old girl in the weight room who needed someone to tell her that movement was medicine and strength was available to her, and that showing up again tomorrow was enough. The following grew. The facility came at year 4. A lease on a space I had no business being able to afford, secured on the basis of a business plan I had written over 3 months, and a loan I had negotiated myself because Dennis and Nancy had not been asked and would not have said yes if they had been. I painted it myself on weekends. I built the brand identity with a graphic designer I found online and paid in installments. I hired my first coach when the wait list became impossible to manage alone, and I hired her well, full rate, proper contract, real terms, because I had built this thing on the principle that work deserved its compensation, and I was not going to run a business that contradicted the thing I had built it on. By year 6, it was real. By year 6, it was more than real. It was a business with a revenue that would have surprised the table at Christmas dinner if I had ever brought it to the table, which I had not, because I had learned very early that bringing things to the table that Nancy had not authorized as impressive was an exercise in managing her response rather than sharing my news. The brand had come to me in October. Todd, the director of partnerships at one of the largest fitness and activewear companies in the country, a brand whose name every person at that Christmas table would have recognized, whose products half of them owned, had sent an email to my business account on a Tuesday morning in October that I had read 3 times before I allowed myself to believe it was real. They wanted a multi-year partnership, not an influencer post, not a one-time sponsored reel, a partnership, a formal, contracted, multi-year agreement that included my name on a product line, a role in campaign development, and a financial arrangement that I will not detail fully here because the number is not the point, except to say that the number was the kind of number that would have made Nancy put down her fork if she had seen it the way she was about to see it. I had signed the contract 2 weeks before Christmas. I had driven to that dinner with the contract summary in my bag. Not because I had planned a moment, not because I had choreographed anything, but because I had been carrying it with me since signing the way you carry something that still doesn't feel entirely real, the way you keep touching the proof of a thing to make sure it is still there. I had intended to tell them at dinner. I had intended, in the optimistic way I kept intending things about this family, to share this news at the Christmas table and have it received as the thing it was, a significant professional achievement. The result of 6 years of building something real, the kind of news that makes a family proud. And then Nancy had said my fitness thing, and the pause had happened, and the table had nodded, and Carla had put down her fork. I reached into my bag. Not dramatically. My bag was on the floor beside my chair, and I reached into it the way you reach for something you know is there, and I took out the folder, and I set it on the table beside my plate. Nancy was still talking to Ray. I said, "Mom." My voice was level. It had taken 27 years to make my voice level in this room, and I was grateful for every single one of those years in that moment. She looked at me. The table did the thing it did when I spoke at family gatherings. A slight reorientation. The mild surprise of a group that was not quite accustomed to the quieter one inserting herself, followed by the attention that came because my voice, when I used it, had apparently a quality that made people listen. I said, "I want to share something." I opened the folder. I turned it so that the relevant page was visible, not the full contract, just the partnership summary, the single page that Todd's team had prepared as a clean overview. My name, their brand name, the term, the scope, the campaign elements, and at the bottom, write the financial summary line. I pushed it to the center of the table. I did not say anything. I let the brand name do what the brand name did in a room where half the people were wearing that brand's products, where that brand's logo lived on water bottles and gym bags, and the very leggings Melissa was wearing at the other end of the table. I let the name land, and I let the summary read itself, and I watched the table read it. Dennis picked it up first. My father, who had spent 27 years agreeing with Nancy about most things because agreeing was the path of least friction, and Dennis had always chosen the path of least friction. Dennis read the summary, and he looked at the brand name, and he looked at the financial summary line, and he put it down on the table without speaking. Melissa read it next. I watched Melissa's face while she read it, and what I saw there was not what I expected. Not the complicated mix of sibling feeling that I might have anticipated, not the slight tightening of someone who has been the point of comparison, and is now watching the comparison invert. What I saw was something simpler. Melissa looked at that page, and she looked at me, and she said clearly, without calculation, "Lauren, this is huge." She meant it. This is the thing about Melissa that I want to be fair about. Melissa was not the villain. Melissa had not asked to be the standard I was measured against. Melissa had been given a position in our family's story without auditioning for it, and she had lived in it without fully understanding what it cost the person beside her. And the moment she understood, she said the true thing without hesitation. "Lauren, this is huge." Nancy had the folder now. I watched Nancy read the summary in the specific way Nancy read things that required her to recalibrate, slowly, carefully, with the slight tension of someone looking for the place where the thing can be managed, where the impressive can be relativized, where the narrative can be rerouted back to something she controls. She looked at the brand name. She looked at the financial summary line. She looked at the term multi-year, my name on a product line, campaign development. She set the folder down. The table was very quiet, not the warm quiet of a family absorbing good news together. The specific quiet of a room in which something has just been revealed that required a lot of silence to exist before this moment. And the silence has now been broken. And nobody quite knows yet what the room sounds like without it. Nancy said, "When did this happen?" "I signed 2 weeks ago," I said. "You didn't tell us." I looked at my mother. "I was going to tell you tonight," I said. "And then you told Ray about my fitness thing." The quiet got quieter. Carla picked up her fork. She looked at her plate. I could see from where I sat that she was working very hard to maintain a neutral expression, and that the working was costing her something. Nancy said, "I didn't mean—" "You did," I said, not loudly, never loudly, in the level voice that 27 years had made available to me, the voice that did not rise because rising would have given the room something to react to other than the truth. "You meant it the way you always mean it," I said. The pause meant something. The everyone finds what works for them meant something. Every Christmas, it means something. The way Melissa's career gets described with the firm name and the specialty and the salary range, and mine gets described as my fitness thing. That means something. Nancy had the expression of a woman who had been met in the specific place she put the knife and found that the person she put it in had been keeping a record. "I have built a real business," I said. "I have built it without this family's financial support, and without this family's professional belief, and mostly without this family's interest in what I was building. I have 6 coaches and a 3-month wait list and 400,000 people who show up to hear what I have to say about what movement does for a human life. And 2 weeks ago, the company whose logo is on Dennis's water bottle and Melissa's leggings decided that my name was worth putting on their products for the next several years." I looked at Nancy. "That is not my fitness thing. That is my career. It has been my career for 6 years. I would like you to call it that." The table was absolutely still. Dennis was looking at the water bottle I had just referenced, which did indeed have the brand's logo on it, which he had not connected until this moment to the folder in the center of the table. Melissa said quietly, "She's right, Mom." Nancy looked at Melissa. Nancy looked at Melissa with the expression of a woman whose primary instrument has just been taken up by the last person she expected to hold it. "She's right," Melissa said again, not loudly, with the simple insistence of someone who had decided that a truth needed to be said twice to land. "I have heard you call her work her fitness thing for years. I thought it bothered me less than it bothered Lauren, because it wasn't about me. But sitting here, right now, I think it bothered me too. Because it wasn't fair, and I think I knew it wasn't fair, and I didn't say so." She looked at me. "I'm sorry," she said, "for not saying so sooner." I looked at my sister. I received her apology for what it was, genuine, late, worth something. "Thank you," I said. Nancy had not spoken. Nancy was sitting at the head of her Christmas table in the room she had decorated for weeks, with the turkey she had spent 2 days preparing and the table she had set with the good china she only used at Christmas, and she was sitting in the specific silence of a woman who has organized her family around a certain story for a very long time and has just watched that story get rewritten in front of 14 people, and the good china. She was not crying. Nancy did not cry in front of people. Another form of refinement she had always claimed. What she was doing was something more interior, more private, the thing that happens in a person when the architecture they have been living in shows a crack large enough to see through. I did not press it. I had said what I had needed to say. I had said it in front of the people who needed to hear it, and I had said it calmly, and I had said it true, and I had not said a single thing I would need to take back in the morning, because everything I had said was a fact that had been living in the family's air for 27 years and had simply been given a name tonight. I picked up my fork. I ate my Christmas dinner. Carla, beside me, served herself more rolls with the composure of someone who has been waiting a very long time for an overdue thing to happen and is now quietly celebratory about it. She pressed her knee briefly against mine under the table, the way we communicated things at this table that could not be said at this table, and I pressed back. The conversation around the table resumed, slowly, carefully, in the way conversation resumes when it is finding its footing after something has shifted. Melissa asked me questions about the partnership, Real questions, specific ones, with the professional interest of someone who understood contracts and wanted to understand this one. Dennis asked about the product line. My Uncle Ray said, to nobody in particular and somewhat wonderingly, that he owned 3 things with that brand's logo, and he looked at me differently after he said it. Nancy said nothing more about the fitness thing. She said nothing much at all for the rest of dinner, and I did not fill her silence for her, which was perhaps the most significant thing I did at that Christmas table. Not the folder, not the contract, not the words I had said. The silence I did not fill. The space I let be exactly the shape of the thing that had been said, and not covered up and not managed back into something comfortable. I drove home late that night with Carla, who had come in my car because we had arranged it that way, and we drove in the quiet that was between us. And then Carla said, "I have been waiting for that for 15 years. I laughed. Was it worth it? I said, "She thought about it. Ask me in a week," she said, "when we see how Nancy processes it. She won't process it quickly." I said, "No," Carla agreed. "She won't." We drove through December streets that had the particular emptiness of Christmas night, everyone inside, the lights still up, the world suspended in the pause between what had just happened and whatever came next. I thought about Todd's email arriving in October, the Tuesday morning, reading it 3 times, the folder I had carried for 2 weeks like a piece of evidence I wasn't sure I'd ever need to produce. I thought about Nancy's pause. It's just not Melissa's path. I thought about being 15 in a weight room, learning that movement was medicine, about showing up for 12 years, about painting the facility on weekends, about every message from every person who had found my content and written to tell me it had changed something real in their life. I thought about Melissa saying, "Lauren, this is huge." And I thought about something I had written once in the early days of the account, when I was still figuring out what I was trying to say and why I was trying to say it. I had written, "Strength is not given. It is not inherited, and it is not assigned. It is built, repetition by repetition, in the specific private labor of a person who showed up when it would have been easier not to, and showed up again, and again, until the thing that was difficult became the thing that was theirs." I had written it about training. I had been writing about my whole life. The contract was in my bag. The brand was real. The career was real. And my mother, at her Christmas table, would have to decide what to do with that, would have to decide whether the story she had been telling was one she could still maintain in the same form, whether the pause still had the same power it had had for 27 years, whether the word thing could be applied to something that a national brand had decided was worth several years and a product line, and her daughter's name on something millions of people would touch. That was her work to do. I had done mine, 6 years of mine, and it was built, and it was documented, and it was not going anywhere, not ever, not for anything,